Welcome back to the CompareSoft podcast. I'm Ryan Condon, host of the CompareSoft ERP podcast, alongside my co-host Prasanna Kulkarni.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me on the podcast. For new listeners who may not know, CompareSoft is a software matchmaking platform. We recommend software products based on software buyers' requirements, budget, workflow, and processes. Over the last 9 years, we have helped 16,000 businesses, the likes of SpaceX, McLaren, Nike, Oxford University, find the right software on our platform. And we get to work with great products like Infor, Oracle, Epicor, Rambase, and 130 other products.
And I'm really excited for today's episode, Prasanna. We're joined by MBC's ERP Head, Aissam Drai. So Aissam runs Oracle Fusion across 38 legal entities and more than 25 integrated applications. So that's covering finance, procurement, HR, and project and performance management too. And that's for group broadcasting to audiences across the Middle East and North Africa.
How exciting. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome back to the CompareSoft ERP podcast. Today we're joined by Aissam Drai, ERP Head at Middle East Broadcasting Centre. Over the last 14 years, Aissam has led ERP rollout across 6 countries at the largest broadcaster in the Middle East. We're thrilled to have you here, Aissam. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How's the weather been out in Riyadh?
Very hot.
Are you caught up in World Cup fever there as well?
Yeah. The timing is a little bit not convenient. I mean, because of the time difference. But you know, when there's an interesting match, then you have to stay up. So
yeah, I don't think England's got a 2 a.m. kickoff for a few weeks though. But I'm not sure I might stay up for that one.
Well, we'll see.
Awesome. So Aissam, you know, you've moved between the UAE and the US throughout your career. Tell us a bit about your journey to becoming head of ERP at MBC Group.
So I started off my journey as an Oracle functional consultant. So I was the person who would go and sit with a client and implement basically the software. So during that time, I had a chance to move between different industries, see different clients, and get exposed actually to from the perspective of an implementer, what works, what doesn't, and really gain lots of experience, because I think being in the implementation side gives you a different perspective than when you move to the being the client, being someone who owns the implementation, as opposed to somebody who comes in because they have signed a contract, and I'm talking specifically about an implementer, and they have a scope that they need to implement. And I think the most important mandate when you're wearing that hat is to get basically whatever is in the scope, to get it implemented and then move on once the project is closed, and move on to the next project. It's totally different when you work in as someone who is implementing a software, and who is going to, after the system goes live, own the support of that software, own basically each and every decision that is taken that is going to impact the software. It's a total different perspective. So after spending time in the consulting field, at some point, I, like many others, I think, made a decision that it's time for me to settle down and take a position at a client site. And at that time, I was working for KPMG. And I think the opportunity working with MBC, especially MBC being a big company, or maybe the biggest, I would say, media company in the region, and one of the biggest in the world. The environment was complex from a systems perspective, an ecosystem perspective, and I was down for taking that opportunity and then making the shift to now own the implementation and be part of the team that supports the system on a daily basis. In addition, of course, to implementing and rolling out projects while running that operation. This is how I ended up taking the role at NBC.
Fantastic, fantastic. Aissam, we looked at your career profile. You've worked at KPMG, you've worked with the royal family in Dubai, and now with a media broadcaster. But also there is a unique experience here of being a consultant and working at some of the biggest places, and then owning the implementation, so to speak, and pushing more for adoption. What would you say, what perspective you got by being a consultant, and how did that shape your decisions around ERP? uh, what did that add to you in terms of context, clarity, trade-offs?
When you're a consultant, I mean, to start off, you're somehow very much focused on the scope that you need to deliver. Uh, uh, that's that's the number one that you care about, because you have a timeline, and that's usually the timeline of the project, and you have that scope. And if you're, let's say, managing the project, you have a number of resources, and you need to basically wrap up that project within that timeline, within budget, and then move on and get the sign off, get the project closed, and then move on. There's lots of other aspects which normally are tied to a project that you, especially if you're coming from a technical background, you have a tendency to turn your back and then not ignore them, but just not focus as much on those as you would if, let's say, you were someone at a client side, like the role I'm playing today. And many times those other aspects, they could make or break your project. But as a consultant, you're really not focused on those. And I think this explains why in the I would say in the industry, we have a high rate of ERP project failures. It's because we tend to focus more on the technology, but the technology is only a small portion of what would make the success, one of the success criteria of an ERP implementation. I think also being in the consulting field exposes you to so many, and I think this is the advantage. It exposes you to so many aspects of an implementation. Because if, let's say, you're doing an implementation at a client that has, let's say, 20,000 employees, with a specific dynamics going on inside that organization, it's different from when you go to a smaller client. um, and I think it puts you under in track to get to know lots of specifics when it comes to the implementation itself. Um, and the outcome, I think it's a very rich experience, especially when it comes to knowing what works and what not. Um, Beyond what's written on the contract, beyond what's written on the statement of work. And I think this is what is equipping us today uh, to challenge any vendor that could come or that comes to work with us. We can ask the right questions to validate or what they say. And it's not that these vendors are coming with bad intentions or anything, but sometimes vendors, they choose the easy way of doing things, which may not really give you the best outcome once it is up and running on production. So we have the capability, we have what it takes to really filter out and make sure that um, we get what we pay for, because we know what works and what wouldn't. And I think this is experience that you gain from the multiple projects that you go to and experience. One client is huge, one client is medium, industries as well. Each industry will bring you some different kind of knowledge. This brings a lots of I think expertise and equips you very well if, let's say, one day you decide to transition from being a consultant to working like full time at a client site.
Awesome, awesome. On that note, Aissam, would you then say like consulting is more scope focused and being on the customer side is more outcome focused? Is that how you would draw the lines there?
That is true. To a large extent, that's true because when you're a consultant, the company deals with you through a timesheet, the number of hours that you bill, and the scope that you deliver. Has it been signed off or not? Period. And then try as much as possible to close on time. That way you can move and take your resources to another project. So it's very focused on this perspective. Whereas when you work in for a company full time, you're there. If something goes wrong, you know that people are going to come and chase you. So
Sure,
you have to make it work, and because you're going to be supporting it anyways after it goes live. So after go live, you're not going anywhere. So
sure.
that's a major difference.
Fantastic,
Mm.
fantastic.
And Aissam, you touched on how complex the system was when you first came to MBC. I'm really curious, like, to understand how does MBC actually use ERP now? So, what's the objective of your ERP system? What departments use its locations, are all tapping into it and using it?
It's what I would call like a big Oracle shop. It's a full-fledged implementation. So we have the full scope of financials implemented. We have the procurement and supply chain. We have the HCM payroll. We have the project costing and what we call PPM, project portfolio management. So what I would say this is like a large implementation, and also it's a multi-entity setup if you want. So we
Mm.
have Oracle running across multiple countries in the region, and it's not like when we say multiple countries, multi-entity, it's not like a copy paste. So whatever setup we have here, it's the exact same thing that we have here. So for example, if you take payroll, payroll in KSA is different than payroll in Egypt, for example, and it's different from
Mm.
the payroll in Jordan because there are legislations. Sometimes there is a different labor law that governs, for example, the social insurance that makes it different from one site. We call them site or location to another one, um, and to be able to grasp um, this uh, this kind of disparity, if you want. I mean, there's a one setup here, one setup in another place, not only in the operations but also in the enhancement, the ongoing enhancement, and on
Mm.
the upgrade. I think this brings lots of challenges to maintain everything in a way that is like stable. Nothing breaks, nothing. Especially like I gave the example of payroll. Payroll is probably one of the most critical ones because if something is wrong with payroll, you cannot wait. It cannot wait. It needs to be because people need to be paid on
Mm.
time. So it needs to be fixed at a certain time, and even the running of the payroll, it runs on a specific time period, time span. So it's very tight, and you don't only have payroll. You have so many other things going on at the same time, in addition to being involved in the project. So I would say it's a fairly not only big but also complex setup and implementation.
Sure,
So
sure.
the complexities are still there, but the ERP system you have now has reduced the headache since when you came in, when you first saw the setup.
Yeah, when I came in, we were operating still on EBS, which is the legacy system,
Hmm.
and then from there we made a transition to Fusion, which is the current cloud system that we're using now. Um, uh, I don't think, and this is true for anybody who is managing an ERP operation. I don't think that you can claim that at any point the complexities like it's faded away totally.
Mm.
You're trying to minimize it, but claiming that it's gone totally, I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah, totally.
If I can give you the example of EBS, when we were in EBS, I remember when I first joined back in 2011, 12, we were running, if I can remember the version, we were running a certain version. I think it was 12.1.3, if I'm not mistaken, if I can remember. And it was full of issues and problems, and we had to migrate. There was a upgraded version where all those issues that we were having were addressed, and we had to make a migration to the upper version to kind of reduce the amount of
Mm.
issues that we were facing at that time. So upgrade was one of the first projects, and then from there, I noticed that there was lots of modules that the company has purchased, but they were not using. So, for example, internet expense was a manual process, and we had an internet expense system. The expense process was manual, and there wasn't an internet expense system. In addition to other processes, so the subsequent mandate was to, okay, since we're paying anyways for those modules, why not use them? But not only use them, but also enhance the way that process
Mm.
is running across the company. And then we started enabling whatever was not in place, but also looking or taking an opportunity to look into processes that were fragmented, that were disconnected, and then fixing those. And at some point, when Oracle started talking about Fusion, it made sense to move to Fusion, because at that point we had two options: either be a latecomer or late adopter after everyone else has adopted the system, or choose to be an early adopter, but go slowly, not like go like big bang implement Oracle Cloud Fusion all
Mm.
across. Go slowly, and then try to build success stories as you're going through that slow pace, because it's a big organization. And we thought from an early stage that big bang probably would not be a good strategy in terms of doing an implementation in such a big organization.
Yeah.
So we transitioned very slowly to Fusion, and started moving, one entity, one process at a time. I remember the first implementation that we launched in Fusion was a module in performance management in Fusion, in the HCM track. That's what we started with. It was not even like a full site or anything. We just tested out many things, because see, the vendor, they can claim many things, when it comes to selling a software, but unless you experience it, unless you do it yourself
Yeah.
with your
With
hands,
real data.
you're not gonna uncover lots of, not that the vendor probably is lying, but I think the complexity and the level of details that you go through when you go into an implementation, it's never something that will be disclosed in a sales pitch or in a presentation.
Mm.
I mean, an implementation goes far way deep into details, and it uncovers lots of complexities that I think unless you do it, you will not get to know those details. So that's, even today when we're on Fusion, I still cannot claim that it's like a rosy picture. We're still trying to, stabilize things
Mm.
and get things to a level where people are more or less satisfied, I would say.
Sure, sure, sure. Exam, one of the things you said here was when you joined the company, you were on a legacy Oracle system, right? And then you took the decision to be an early adopter, but you take a phased implementation approach and, optimize the speed for outcome, but still be the, first adopter. What was the driving decision behind you taking the decision to be an early adopter and move towards the cloud? Like, was it people related? Was it technology related? Was it culture related? What were you trying to establish by moving to Fusion and be one of the early adopters?
I think it was mostly people related. And when I talk about people, I talk about people from two different groups.
Okay.
One is my own team, and the other one is the user that we're serving. So for my own team, um, people coming from EBS to Fusion, it's two different systems, even though it's the same company, but it's two different systems from an user interface perspective. Many processes were changed when we moved to Fusion. The structure is different in Fusion. The role of the access and the roles and the role structure is different in Fusion as opposed to the responsibilities are, the certain technical things were different that were making the software different. So to be able to push the team to embrace new knowledge, and we didn't want to let go of our own people because they were very important to us because they had the knowledge of the business of the company. So that's very important, I think, when you're managing an ERP operation. So I needed time to slowly transition them from EBS people to start to thinking a little bit Fusion kind of thinking. So that's one area. So moving on to the business, uh, that that's related to change. You cannot just come and tell people, we have taken a decision to move to Fusion and just expect that they would easily just move with you and accept it. We had to strategize in terms of slowly making them digest the system, the idea, have them sit in mini workshops, maybe start with a small module, build a success story and present that to them. And being an early adopter gives you a little bit more time as if you are a latecomer. I think this was the driving force, is we needed more time. And we said, okay, let's try things out without really taking too much risk. Let's start small and see what is this for ourselves. And I think that's what we have done.
Sure. And if you are able to, list top 3 pain points you had with EBS stroke legacy system, Aissam, what would they be? Like, what were the practical pain points you were experiencing, both from a people standpoint and business standpoint? And you said, you know what, we have to do this as a first adopter and take calculated risks here.
Yeah, the first one was the user interface. The user interface on EBS was not really the greatest, to the point that at that time, and I think companies like this still exist because EBS is still running for many companies. There were companies that were built around or on top of Oracle that were selling. Their product was primarily just a user interface that you would take and place on top of the user interface, because the original user interface from Oracle was just awful and horrible. Though they've improved it over time, but it really was not really there. And I think Fusion, I mean, that's one of the main things that they've focused on Fusion, and they keep doing it. I mean, user interface is totally different. So user interface was one. The other thing is the customizations. EBS was an open book. You pretty much you could do anything you want. I had a chance to work for a short period on SAP, and SAP, because when I went to the project working on SAP, I was asking about customizations, and when people would tell me, "No, it's impossible. You cannot do that." Whereas in Oracle, it's an open book. You could pretty much customize anything. Now that ties to the third point, which is the upgrades. Upgrades on Oracle were painful because they were long in terms of time, and also because you have been used to customize, sometimes upgrades are almost impossible because the amount of customizations that you would have accumulated over a period of time, because they were so easy to do, and because by default, users have that tendency of customizing or asking you to customize everything, which is another topic. And you end up in a situation where upgrades become almost impossible. So that leads to what? Leads to your investment that you have done. If Oracle is having upgraded versions that you can take benefit from, you simply cannot do them. So there's no ROI. That's the I would say these are the three main issues that we were facing, and I think they somehow also contributed to or drive to the decision to move to Fusion, because the thinking process in Fusion is totally different.
Sure. And at that point, Aissam, did you think about looking at external systems, or were you sold on that? No, we are moving to Oracle, but a better version, and we are going to continue with Oracle. Did you consider anything else in the market?
See, changing an ERP system is not an easy thing. I mean, this is why it's extremely important that before you select, if let's say you're considering an ERP system, when you're doing that phase of selection, usually people tend to go and then sit in a meeting room and then start looking into functionalities, or comparing functionalities from this system and the other one. And I would say that this is really the wrong approach. Functionalities are the last thing to look at. You really need to do lots of housekeeping work inside before you even look into an ERP system, because once you are in, it is extremely difficult. It's not impossible, but it's extremely difficult to get out. So for us, moving to Fusion, um, and we never thought about changing the system, because we are a big organization, and that would be really costly. I mean, from many perspectives, if we were to consider a different system. And honestly, we said internally, let's do it in a way that is slow, steady, look into all the risks, try to to mitigate the risks, and then move slowly. And this again explains why we started early.
Fantastic.
So that just for context there was no other talk of a different vendor, a different product during that selection process. It was always focused on Oracle Fusion.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. And then you obviously made that decision, to do all your implementations in-house. Could you just walk us through how you ended up taking the project on yourselves?
Yeah. See, I mentioned earlier the knowledge of the business is extremely important. I think no one can claim that they know your business better than people who are inside the company, because they spend enough time to give them a chance to learn really the intricacies of what that business is about. And I think this is valuable as far as expertise is concerned, beyond knowledge of the system, which normally an implementer they excel at. An implementer, they know very well the system, but when they come in, unfortunately, in the world of ERP, it's not like a one size fits all. You really need to understand the business. So sometimes, yes, there are good consultants who could come and uh, um, um, they can absorb your process and your business fast, but it's not guaranteed. Most of the time, that's not the case. You will even find consultants who care less about understanding your process. They just want to implement, the system. And I think when I was talking about me being in the consulting versus now being at a customer site, we used to prioritize speed over not quality, but if I'm going to spend more time trying to understand the business, I would need more time. And that time, if the customer is not paying for it, I'm not going to ask, my company to pay for it. So it's a very difficult situation. So having an internal team that understands the process very well, and that can bring value in terms of holding the vendor accountable in case, if let's say we bring an implementer, we even have that expertise in-house that can hold the vendor accountable in case they do something that is not up to our expectation. I think it was something like strategically, it was something that we needed to have. Now, initially, there was a decision taken by the management that the implementation would be given to an implementer. So we've tried two implementers; it did not really work, and in the third attempt, we took it. It was given to us, and then we took the implementation. It was fully done in-house. The whole transformation, going from one country to another, was done from from our own team, and I think it paid off. I mean, that strategy of building that internal expertise, it did pay off, because even when we had those implementers, we had a body sitting in the meetings that could prove certain things wrong.
Mm.
Not that we wanted to fail them or anything, but I think we were trying to build a solid outcome. But at the end, they could not. I think they faced so much complexities that they could not deliver. And thank God we had a plan B, because our team took over, and they've done it. They've done it successfully. Not through one site, not through two sites, through the whole six sites that we maintain. And I think having also an internal expertise, an implementer, they will come, they will implement, they will leave. They'll do
Yeah.
probably a hypercare period where they do a support 2 or 3 months, and then they will leave after that. Um, the journey of an implementation starts when you go live. And it starts not for a couple of months after you go live. It could go for years before you
Mm.
get to a point where you stabilize your system. When you have an internal team that has implemented, that has architectured your system, it makes a whole difference in terms of support and running the operation. The quality that you would get, the level of understanding, um, when you have a conversation between the business and the ERP team, that's a different level than if you're bringing a someone from outside. Let's say this implementer, they have implemented, they've given you the hypercare, they left, then you start getting some issues, you bring them back. You bring them back basically to fix something that they've built themselves, and they're
Sure.
charging you for it. So I mean, it didn't really make sense to us. But there's one, I think, one detail that I need to highlight here. This model may not be right for each and every organization, because it's costly. Because
Sure.
to
Yeah.
build an internal expertise, not only from a number perspective, because you have to have many people in house, but also in terms of time, how much time it is going to take you to build this expertise. It takes time.
Mm.
um, it really depends on the nature of your operation. Uh, our organization is continuously changing. We have implementations going on frequently. We have frequent changes. I think it made more sense for us to have internal expertise, even from a cost perspective. If we were to bring in outside consultants or companies to do it, it would have costed us a lot more than what we're paying now. So it made sense for us. It doesn't mean that this is like a magic formula. It may
Sure.
not work in other organizations. So it depends really what dynamics you're into.
Sure. Sure. Isam, that's a super important point you talked about there. Uh, A, it's not for everybody, and B, it's a costly option, right? Like, being on both sides of the table, right? You probably have a better idea of the cost differences. So in percentage terms, if you could, if you could, talk about what the cost differences are. And then the second layer here is, how do you take an expensive option to your management and then convince them to invest more after two not so successful passes on ERP? How was that journey like?
The cost difference could be really massive. I mean, I can give you examples. I mean, in certain implementations, we were quoted a million and a half to do not all entities, just a number of entities. Now, we're talking $1 million.
Sure.
Compare that to, I would say, the cost, the payroll cost, basically of let's say 20, 25, 30 consultants. I think the difference is massive. Now, I wouldn't even quantify the cost from this perspective only. I
Sure.
spoke about the maybe the quality that you get
Sure.
when you're running the operations in terms of support. I think that quality, uh, uh, I don't think it can be quantified, because the amount of time that you would spend on having, let's say, an exchange with a consultant who does not understand your process, and they take the requirement from you, they go on, they build something, and then they deliver it, and it's not working. Now, think about the amount of time that you've spent from both sides, the amount of money that you've spent, and to get something that is not even going to work at the end when it's delivered. When it comes to us, we really cannot go wrong, because we understand what the business, because we're part of their day to day
Sure.
operation. So
Sure.
we cannot go wrong about understanding what exactly they want. Sometimes when we talk about the quality of the consultants, one of the skill set that a good consultant need to have is the ability, or their ability, to gather requirements. Now, when we say gather requirements, it does not mean, I hear from the business what they want to say, I document it. It goes way beyond that. It's the
Sure.
ability to ask the right questions to get what the business is not telling you, because you know what they do, and they have this hidden process that they're running on a off system, in an Excel sheet, and then you tell them, how about this? And a consultant may never know about this, because they're not part of your day-to-day life, and an operation inside an organization. I think the cost, when you're comparing the two, um, I cannot even put a number to it. It's really massive. And in going back to the second part of your question, how do we convince the management? Uh, we did we start when we started looking into the rollout of Fusion, and before we called the implementers, we picked up one small entity, Jordan, and we rolled that out.
Okay.
The idea was that we wanted to make that a success story. At that time, it was a small entity.
Sure.
When those implementations from the implementers, they failed, uh, we actually went and approached the management, and we said, okay, let us do it. We have done, this one as a I would say,
Pilot.
as a pilot, if you want, and give us a chance to and we didn't get, um, like, the go ahead to do everything. We only got the go ahead to do another, like, the next small one, if you want. And then
Sure.
we went like this. I think, over the course of that transformation, I think we were building momentum, and we were showing one implementation after another one that this implementation will only be successful with us, not with anyone else. And this is how we continued, basically.
What
Amazing.
was the success metrics coming out of that first entity? The phased approach with Jordan. What was it that was driving the next entity?
Usually, when you go live, um, it's usually not smooth. It's usually, once you go live, then you start hearing lots of problems. This is not working. This is, it's broken here. It's The success criteria was that it was so smooth that people even couldn't believe that we have gone through an implementation. And I think it ties back to the strength of the team who did the implementation, because they were really on top of it. They knew what they've built. They knew if you tell them that something is, somewhere not working, they knew exactly where to look. And then even the time span people were taking in terms of resolving issues. I would be lying if I told you that there were no issues. There were issues, but the speed and the amount of, I would say, quality that we're fixing those issues was so fast that people kind of, got relief. They got also confidence that we have with us, people that can support us, and the operations was not affected. So it was, to a large extent, it was very smooth. And I
Sure.
think this is what made it a success story.
Yes. And Isam, you touch on an element here which we constantly hear, that ERP implementation starts after go live. And the success of ERP implementation is, you should not experience that it's a go live. It should be so smooth. So that's That's just fantastic to hear from you. In your experience, Aissam, like, what would you say are the top three things your team does that ensures that the KPIs are met? Like, what's the framework you use with your team members? What's the framework you use with data? What's the framework you use for adoption? If you could give us a couple of things there, that would be really, really useful.
I think discipline is very important. I mean, for example, I mean, when we moved to Fusion, we were introduced to frequent upgrade. In Fusion, the upgrade is something that is pushed through by Oracle, and you agree with Oracle on a time frame, on a schedule throughout the year, and you don't have a choice. I mean, an upgrade is going to happen at a given time, and whether you want to do it or not, it is coming your way. So you have to get into the kind of uh, be disciplined, and get to know that I have 4 upgrades that will happen throughout the year. I need to have a process that needs to be well adopted, both from the operations team as well as the business, for this to go as smooth as possible. Otherwise, if you don't do your testing properly, something is going to break, and it's going to affect your so I think discipline is very important. And this is an element that was introduced that people in EBS, we were not used to that in EBS. In EBS, you do an upgrade whenever you want.
Sure.
And this is why the upgrades on EBS were so much distanced, and
Sure.
for some customers they were not even happening. This is also why, because if, let's say, in EBS you could stay for years and not do an upgrade, and then when you have an upgrade, it was like a huge project because you had to go through so many versions, and it's just it's not efficient. It's you've missed so many things in between, and that whole process changes on Fusion, and you need to be disciplined. You need to adopt discipline. It's not easy. I mean, it's easy to say we need to be disciplined, but implementing it and pushing people to endorse it, especially from the business side, because I don't have much control over the business. I do have control more over my team, but on the business, yeah, we communicate, we talk, but at the end of the day, they need to do it. They need to agree to do it. We have ways of helping, kind of help people to kind of endorse these new practices, but it's not always guaranteed. So I would say discipline is number one. The second one, which I keep on touching, is knowledge of your business. Knowledge of your business. That's something that very valuable, and irrespective of the system that you're bringing, whether it's Fusion, I think that remains one of the most important um, uh, um, skill set that your team needs to have. Um, uh, what we have done in our team, the people that came in that were maintaining EBS and that had that deep knowledge of the business inside the organization, we brought in some younger consultants with Fusion background, um, and somehow made the two work together. Um, uh, and we brought basically a new blood into the team, with those who have the business expertise still being the seniors. But to my surprise, they all adopted Fusion in the way, because uh, interaction day after day with the business, with those new consultants that came in. Sometimes you would think, but because they were senior, they would not go back and sit in, in training kind of benches, try to absorb new knowledge about, how Fusion works and stuff. But I think with the implementations that we've gone through, the interactions, they picked up Fusion, and I think uh, uh, we have a very uh, um, I think a strong team today, whether the new consultants or the old ones that are making up this team that is now being able today to provide lots of value to the company. So yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic.
And obviously, we've touched on it there. The success of an ERP system, it hinges on that user, that field adoption, and if you spot someone, use shadow systems, workarounds or anything, what is your process to get them back on track?
We try as much as possible to understand what made them go for a shadow system. The first, and I noticed this many times in IT ERP teams, the first reaction is that, let's say, we would be upset. Why you've put a system that we have put effort on and we're supporting, and then you basically just put that system aside and you went to adopting like a shadow system. There's a reason probably that they've gone to that shadow system. The adoption sometimes has valid reasons, and if you try to put yourself into the shoes of a user, and think from their perspective, like I sometimes I go myself into Fusion or into EBS, and I had to go through, let's say, a specific process to do something, and sometimes it is cumbersome. You have to go through so many screens to get something done. So and it's annoying. It's time consuming, and sometimes those people that go into that system, they don't log into the system every day. They probably log into the system once a week. They forget. You cannot really expect them that they would remember what screen to go to do this, just like that. And the alternative, if let's say they open an Excel sheet, it's one sheet. They probably can do everything there. They don't have to go through multiple screens, do this, do that, call this person to ask them, how do I do this? Add to this probably that the whole interface is not user friendly in the case of EBS. That brings lots of frustration. We try as much as possible to understand why is it that they have gone to that shadow system, and we try as much as possible to see if we can do anything to bring them back into ERP system. Because we also need to understand that a user at a certain level, now ERP system serves a certain purpose. I mean, it's a system that manages basically specific processes and operations inside a company. It gathers that data, and that data is used later on to make decisions. Now, sometimes people, they're not seeing that level where that data is being consumed. And to them, they're only focused on that screen where they have to enter that information that is difficult, and it's just annoying. Now, how can we make that experience easy? Um, um, Retraining or refresher training, yes, it's good. It may or may not solve the problem. Showing them or being at their shoulder every day sometimes may not really prove to be practical, because you're not going to be there like 24/7. There's one thing that helped us and that we started using recently is AI. AI is a new addition that we're adopting mainly for automation, and Oracle Fusion specifically is bringing lots of innovation around AI and around how things could be done, specifically around automation inside ERP, to not to eliminate the user from the equation, but to help maybe take some of that pressure of having to deal with multiple screens when you want to do something really simple. I can give you examples, for example, of one enhancements that we have done recently, um, related to the creation of requisitions. Sometimes you have a person, like the people that usually enter requisitions in the system, they come with like a pile of paper full of lines of transactions that they need to enter. Now imagine if I take that pile of paper and I tell the user, you don't really have to key in all of this information. and sometimes they do it throughout days because it's so long that they
Sure.
cannot do it all in one shot. So if I take all of that, I scan it, and then the AI fetches the information, pushes the information into the screens, and then the human comes only to check if everything was done right, and they click a button. I think that will help tremendously in terms of adopting the system. And this is something that we are embracing more and more to
Yeah.
help with the system adoption. Yeah, we can stabilize the system. System is working with no technical issues per se, but if a system is not used, then you have not served the purpose.
Sure.
You're not going to be able to get data that you will use for decision making, or at other level. So I think the use of AI, the example I gave you, and then we have many other examples. I think it's a very good tool that we're trying to leverage to help with the adoption inside the company.
Fantastic. Aissam, this is going in the zone of AI agents, right? So, like, how many agents you plan to use in your ERP in the next 12, 18 months?
Um, uh, we want to use as much as possible if we can. We're facing also uh, I think there are two problems. There's a problem of cost, and there's a problem of adoption.
Sure.
Um, Cost, we're trying to see the best way of minimizing the cost to zero if we can.
Sure.
Because in Oracle, anything that is out of the box, you can use it for free. But many times, whatever is out of the box does not serve the purpose 100%. So we
Sure.
need to bring in some customizations to those agents to make them fit the requirement that we have. Now, once
Sure.
you put in a customization, then you need to start paying for that. And we're looking into ways to minimize the cost to the minimum. I think Oracle also is doing lots of effort because there's very low adoption in Oracle customers in general when it comes to AI. I think Oracle is deploying efforts trying to help push this through revisiting their cost to encourage people to adopt more and more. So this is
Sure.
one element. The other element is the adoption at our level. People has that tendency of thinking that this is going to take away my job.
Sure.
And by no means that's absolutely not what we intend to do. Because at the level where we are, the human needs to be in the loop. So what we're doing, instead of having somebody who's basically driving, and the analogy here is it's the user who is entering transactions. What we're saying, take that self-driving cab instead of going in a cab that has a driver.
Sure.
That cab cannot move without you because
Sure.
it doesn't make any sense. You need to be inside the cab for the cab to start moving.
Sure.
So we're bringing the human in the middle, and the human's role is basically to supervise what the agent is going to be doing. And I think for many years to come, the concept of human in the loop is very important,
100%.
and I think that will keep being there. What we're doing, we're probably taking lots of time that the user used to spend entering transactions. We're taking the frustration away of having to deal with a cumbersome, let's say, interface or process from screen to screen. We're taking the probably the error prone uh, 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 process that is usually linked to users that have to deal with a system that there is either not user friendly or a bit more or less complex. We're taking all of that away,
Sure.
and we're replacing it with AI to bring in more efficiency and to give some time back to users to do something that probably either the AI cannot do or that could add more value to the company. And there's plenty. We don't get involved into that. We leave that to the management of those departments to decide on. But I think our role is basically just to bring technology, enable technology, and put it before them, and then they can see how to best use it. But it's already proven, at least at our level, that this is really gonna add lots of value if properly adopted.
Fantastic. That's so great to hear. And we see a lot of companies using existing data, existing processes, and to use your analogy, like, make the car self-driving, but you just have the human in the loop. Absolutely. Coming on to insights and advice, Aissam, we have already given, so much useful, practical insights in here. Uh, if there is an ERP leader out there listening to this conversation, what would be your advice to the ERP leader on selection and on implementation and adoption? Like, if you could give your top 3 tips for each of the areas, that I think would be super useful.
I think when it comes to selection, don't jump into evaluating a software before you do some internal housekeeping. I think that it's extremely important. I think this is also going to touch on the next point regarding the implementation. What I mean by internal housekeeping, it's not enough to have your process documented. I think your process needs to be agreed, and I'll explain. A documented process, especially when it comes to overlapping processes. For example, the procure to pay, where two departments, they need to agree on certain things because a process starts in procurement and it finishes in finance. The payables is in finance, the procurement is in the procurement department. And at some point, there is an overlap between these two processes where these two departments, they need to sit together to agree on certain things that touches both of them. That's an agreed process. Because if you don't do this, this is something that you will have to deal with during the implementation.
Absolutely.
And an implementation cannot afford, these kind of conflicts. How many approval process we're going to have? We need 20 layers over, let's say 15 or something like this, or the cost element needs to be structured in a certain way, and then you have two departments who are not agreeing. I think it's very important that we usually say or frequently say streamlined process, which is a purely corporate jargon that people do not understand, but
Sure.
in layman terms, this is what it means. Not only document your process, but have agreed process as well. And an agreed process is a process that everybody is on the same page when it comes to that process across departments. I think this is very important. And don't pay too much attention to the features, as I said earlier, and compare, this software has these features and these features. I think that needs to sit a little bit in a less priority, as opposed to looking into your process and making sure that your processes are agreed. Now, if that is done, some people, they call this like the phase 0, before even an implementation starts. Now, if that's done, then your implementation, more or less, is going to go smooth. Then during the implementation, depending again on the dynamics of your organization, if you cannot have a large team that is going to hold that vendor that is going to come and do the implementation, if they're not going to hold that vendor accountable for whatever they deliver, at least you need to have the minimum viable number of people, even if it's just one person or maybe two, depending on the size, depending on the complexity of the processes. That person needs to have full knowledge of your process, expertise, and some knowledge of the application. Without that expertise, without that in-house expertise, you're at the mercy of the vendor. And the vendor, they capitalize for getting the scope done quickly and then walking away. This is their model. There's probably nothing wrong with it. There's only something wrong with it if I under deliver. But as long as they're delivering, then they're fine. But validating the quality of that delivery, nobody's going to do it for you. You have to do it, and to be able to do it, you need to have someone internal to be able to do it. Some companies, what they do, and I worked on a project while I was with KPMG. the implementer was at that time, I think, PwC. We came in not as an implementer. We came in as the advisory that was playing the role of the validator. So there were two consulting companies in-house, and we were basically playing that role. Just to tell you to what extent it is important, except that we were coming, of course, at a very high ticket. I mean, you could have that resource, not really that expensive, but I think the value that they could bring is very important. Yeah. The third element that I would touch on is data migration. Data is usually a nightmare during implementations, and people tend to underestimate it. Now, it's very difficult to say that um, uh, at the end of an implementation project, we will have immaculate data and everything is just, but at least do your due diligence in terms of knowing your data, knowing who owns your data, knowing the kind of problems that you have with your data or issues, um, rather than going into the project thinking that this is just an implementation of a software and you forgot totally about your data, because your data could, people don't understand or underestimate the amount of effort that goes into data migration, and the complexity as well that goes into it. Sometimes just coming up with the architecture or the structure of how the approach that we're going to do or take to migrate data from the old system to the new one, um, uh, that in itself is a project. Now, for you doing an implementation and underestimating that is not a. I think it may lead to major problems. And I would add one fourth point, which is most of the time underestimated, not looked into, is change management. I think change management is very important. Usually, it's not given the amount of importance it needs to get, and from that perspective, the steerco, the board, the C level, when you go and talk to them about change management, and they're not really that much willing to give you extra budget for it. I think it's important. Sometimes it is really that important that you need to start both the change management as well as the data migration projects before you even start looking into your implementation. It really depends on the organization, on the dynamics. Culture also plays a lot. But these are just, a few things that came top of my head that I'm sharing here.
Brilliant. You know, they are absolutely important and critical from the way you have positioned it. Absolutely. I guess coming to some fun parts in here, Aissam, like, you have been in the ERP industry for some time. Like, what do you see as the most painful part of an ERP program?
I go back to data migration. It could turn into a nightmare, really. It's and this is why I talk about it. I mean, it's really something you need to pay attention to, because I myself have gone through issues, and because of lack of planning, sometimes lack of proper planning, it's one of the painful area that you need to pay attention to early on to avoid chaos.
And have you got a memorable mistake that you'll be comfortable sharing with us?
Absolutely. There are many, not just one, but I remember one. Otherwise, how would you learn, right? Um, yeah. There was one time, and this is in the early days. Now, in the early days, I noticed that every time we deliver, it's always very difficult to get the sign off. Like the users would drive us crazy. Sometimes, they don't want to sign off because they're afraid. Sometimes they don't want to take responsibility. Now, at some point, I realized, maybe because when we go to the requirement gathering, they give us their requirements. We start to give them advice. Now, don't do this, don't do that, and then somehow that requirement turns to be whatever they told us, in addition to whatever we tell them, right? And maybe at that time I used to say, maybe it's because of this. How about we let them basically tell us 100% what they tell us? Maybe that will speed up the sign off. And that's what we've done. So we went on and, okay, you tell us what you want. We're not going to change this a bit. We put that on a document. We give it to them. So we expect that the sign off would come the next day. Yet it didn't come. So, so it's it's very difficult to get sign off, because I think what people tell you and what they see once you build that, usually these two pictures are not the same. And I think people are signing off based on what they see in front of them, not the document where you have gathered those requirements. So I think this was the funny, the mistake that I've done in terms of, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, Aissam, you've been a fantastic guest. You've given such an honest, practical view of why you chose to implement in-house, your phased rollout across 6 very different regions, entities, and how you're addressing those user adoption challenges as well now. That's really going to resonate with anyone weighing up their ERP selection and implementation decisions today. So thank you so much for joining us again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time as well. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next show. Thanks, Aissam. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.